do not know what are our priorities, because we have tended to invest more in seeking to control women instead of helping them to access information and to prevent them from dying when giving life. And you find that even the current efforts on dealing with this issue have focused more on maternal health and not a holistic approach to ensuring that women need to access their sexual and reproductive health services and rights. So you also find that most of the interventions are also minimalist, because they just want to assume or focus on the woman as a mother, as if women don't have other sexual desires, needs, and rights. And so we are trying to kind of block that part, that you have young people who need information and services. We have single women. So we are still looking at it in terms of it's just about maternal health and not a full package. And the issue of maternal mortality, although sometimes is looked at mostly from a health perspective, I think also is a pointer to the lack of linkages between education, food security, the broader health services, poverty, discrimination, violence against women, and especially in Africa in conflict situations, and of course also practices such as child marriage and female genital mutilation, because they are so intertwined that you cannot afford to look at them in a very isolated way. And so we are not only failing to look at the issue holistically, but also linking it up with developments in other sectors. When you look at MDG 6 on HIV and AIDS, the MDGs focused on reversing the spread of HIV/AIDS by 2015 and ensuring universal access by 2010. But then if you look at the statistics, globally 50% of people living with HIV and AIDS are women. Of course, if you narrow down to sub-Saharan Africa, it is 60%. So we are not seeing a reduction in the spread. And this is mainly because, again, the focus is on PMTCT, prevention of mother-to-child infection, and not broadly on women. So we find that actually on PMTCT, the access has increased to 48%. So that is being celebrated. But then interventions have largely failed to recognize the unequal power relations between men, women, boys, and girls. And also the interventions that have been promoted, that are being promoted and funded, have also failed to appreciate, to link issues of sexual and reproductive health and violence against women. That, and especially violence against women in Africa, remains a key driver of the infection. But we find that trying to shift resources, the huge amount of resources going into HIV/AIDS, into addressing issues of violence against women and providing sexual and reproductive health and services, has remained something that is civil society pushing from outside with very huge resistance. So then it means that we are not going to see that feminization of the HIV/AIDS epidemic change. Then it means that it's going to remain feminized in Africa for a long time until we change the strategies. In terms of the way forward, I think that the first thing that we need to do is to insist that we need to implement the Beijing Platform for Action in its entirety, because the MDGs just simply borrow some of that. And without implementing the Beijing Platform for Action, then we are not going to be able to implement the MDGs. The second thing is that we have the MDGs, but the model we use in implementation, especially the development, especially the economic development model, does not fit, is not there to support the implementation of the MDGs, because we know that, and we have questioned for a long time, that the economic models being used do not take into account women's opportunities and do not protect women's rights. And I think we still need to continue stating that we have to change the models. And I think the economic crisis is pointing to that there's somewhere we have gone wrong. And we need to go back to models that integrate a human rights-based approach, models that are democratic, and models that allow participation. Because as we know, we were not even consulted when they were defining the MDGs. So if you compare the consultation when developing the Beijing Platform for Action and the MDGs, then you find that participation is always very key. So I think we need to continue questioning the development model. The other thing is that because of that weak model, you find that even at national level, we have policies that work at cross purposes. We are having ministries working at cross purposes because there is no coordination, even at national level. And in terms of women's rights, in implementing these MDGs, I think there is need for a multi-sectoral approach so that we have policy coherence, so that the policies in education boost the policies in health, the policies in financing, in investment, then also promote gender equality. So I think there's need for that policy coherence. And then the other thing we need to continue advocating for is financing, because as I pointed out, there are so many resources going into MDG 6. No doubt, we've seen a lot of funds going into HIV and AIDS. But what about MDG 5? What about MDG 3? So also you find that financing is very, very unbalanced. And it is because of the framework, again, the framework we are using for aid. We are being told that aid has increased. It may decrease with the financial crisis. But then if you ask yourself, with that increase, how much has gone into financing women's empowerment and gender equality, then you come to discover there's very little. So again, aid effectiveness has remained technical. Of course, we know there's all this focus on national ownership. And so in that debate, we are being told we can't push for gender equality because if we push, we are going to be told it's a conditionality. But then the question is, how does gender equality and women's empowerment become a conditionality? Yet the MDGs, Beijing Platform for Action, CEDAW, are instruments adopted by governments on both sides. So they all have an application. So I think also the financing modes need to be challenged. And then the other thing is that we also need to continue calling for investment, especially in agriculture in Africa, because that is what has led to the food insecurity, because we have neglected in agriculture, and of course that means we have neglected African women, inputs in land. And if that trend continues, even in the debates on climate change that have impact on agriculture and women's livelihoods, then if women don't participate and we don't integrate a gender perspective in the discussions on climate change, then we'll continue to get marginalized. So just to say that we also need to be very focused on the discussions, the policies, the interventions that are coming up on climate change. Lastly, I think that we need to focus and draw attention to the centrality of women's sexual and reproductive health and rights, the issues of violence against women, and the issues of conflict, especially in Africa. And just to say that unless these three issues are integrated in the MDGs, then we'll still be lagging behind in a big way. And then we know that even where we have had advances, we know that a big challenge still remains, even in institutions and structures, a very big challenge of discrimination and bias against women and women's issues, because civil society has been raising these issues, but I think the very patriarchal nature of these institutions and structures has also remained a very huge challenge. And I think getting more women who have the analysis, who have the skills, the passion, and the politics will also go a long way. And that's why we insist on getting more women in politics and decision making. will not happen. As African women have been saying, there is nothing for us without us. We also need to be on the driving seat. Thank you.